All right. So it's my pleasure to interview you, Mr. Eastburn, Drake. How are you today?
I'm great. It's good to see you. We got all these electronic things figured out here.
Yeah, finally. So just to say a couple of things about you, you're a hypnotist, a hypnotherapist, and psychotherapist in a couple of international, how do you say, groups. You're connected to
organizations, yeah.
Right, yeah. And you used to be the Olympic hypnotist for the American cycling team.
Yeah.
You still do a lot of work with
cyclists, yes, or athletes in general, but yes, a lot of cyclists I've worked with.
Yeah. And also MMA fighters and or mixed martial arts, boxing, a bit of that as well.
Yes, I've even worked with fencers and strange things like that. But,
yeah, and I mean, just before we go into, I mean, you have a really extended amount of experience in the field of hypnosis, over 30 years. You've written, if I'm correct, over 7 books, and you're writing a couple more.
Right.
And I would like to start with you on a simple level about the first question would be, what is hypnosis for you?
This is the simple one.
Yeah, the simple one, right?
Well,
yeah.
Having written a book titled "What is Hypnosis," I should be the person who could answer this question. And actually, I'm working on another book right now that's going into even greater depth in this subject.
Mm-hmm.
But there's been many, many definitions of hypnosis, and most of them are lacking considerably. Most of the definitions that people hold that are popular are not definitions of hypnosis at all, but they are descriptions of things that occur as a result of being in a hypnotic state. Like some say, well, you might be very relaxed or very profoundly relaxed. Well, that could be true, but we could also be very hypnotized and not relaxed at all. Or you hear things like a state of heightened suggestibility. But
right.
And that is associated with hypnosis. You have to be in hypnosis to experience that heightened state. So the heightened state can't be the definition of hypnosis. If you have to be hypnotized to experience it, it's one of the outcomes of hypnosis. And most of the definitions you find are like that. Now, the problem is that as humans, we like to compartmentalize things, make things easy to understand. And we've got this huge topic and we're trying to put it in this little bitty compartment and it doesn't fit very well. And so that's kind of been my pursuit here for some time, is to make it more understandable. The problem with something like hypnosis is that because it's not easy for people to understand, then they fear this thing.
Right.
And then when they don't understand something, they fear it, then they vilify it. And they create it to be some sort of a demon or something, which it's not, because hypnosis is occurring right now. It's occurring between you and I. It's occurring between people who are watching this video. It's in our every breath we take, just about, So I've come up with a whole new kind of theory of hypnosis, and I'm going to be giving a talk here soon that will be on YouTube, but I'm going to be talking about trance, altered states of consciousness, out-of-body experiences, lucid dreaming, hypnosis. And I'm going to show how all these things are really kind of the same.
Interconnected. Interesting. I didn't know that you're doing that. Interesting.
Yeah. So this should be fun. It should be happening pretty soon as we get a venue. And like that, there's a few different universities in the area that I'm kind of working with to put on this talk. But I've brought it down to what I call the application theory of hypnosis. And first I'm going to read you a little statement that is as close as I think I can get to putting that hypnosis into a box.
Okay.
And then I'm going to read you the whole piece that it fits into, and you can kind of see how that works. Hypnosis is a constant variable state of which through certain methods can cause particular effects to occur, which we refer to as hypnotic. So in my mind, there's no doubt that hypnosis exists, but it exists as we experience it. So now here's the whole statement. This goes on for a while. Okay, so what if hypnosis is none of the things we have believed and argued it to be? What if hypnosis is application? And what I mean by that is, what if hypnosis is a constant variable state of which through certain methods can cause particular effects to occur, which we refer to as hypnotic? These effects can be intentional through formal hypnosis or unintentional through informal hypnosis. The effectiveness of these applications can vary depending on the subject's state of consciousness, level, the method by which the application is used, and by whom, which includes the believability, skill and intention, the waking hypnosis of the operator when the method is performed by someone toward another individual or individuals, or through self-hypnosis, rather than serendipitously informal hypnosis. Informal hypnosis very much is a part of the application theory, although it is not always as clear as to what may have triggered a hypnotic response and outcome. Also included is the receptivity of the individual or individuals to his or her own auto-implied suggestion or waking hypnosis and expectation, along with mood, the alignment of the planets, the current political state at the time, the weather, and Lord knows what other possible variables. Now, I could keep going, but maybe that's where you want me to stop. I don't know. Well, I do want to say this.
Yes.
When I say that hypnosis is a constant variable state, some may want to read that as constantly variable state, which is not incorrect, but my intention is to show that it is a state which is with us no matter what state, level, or depth of consciousness we may be in. And through many variations of consciousness, and the variations can have an effect on the hypnotic response. Again, it may mean that some of us will have to stretch a bit to use the term state in describing something that displays so little consistency. And you know, there's a lot of debate, especially amongst academics, as to whether hypnosis is a state or it's a non-state. And most of the non-state theories are not that great. And well, as a matter of fact, the state ones aren't that great either. But it's not hard for people to think that, how do we call this thing a state? Because usually when we think of a state, we think of things like our state of well-being, or the state of the economy, or our state of health, or our a state as a geographical limitation. So a state kind of confines things, but hypnosis doesn't get confined very well. But I find it easier to talk about hypnosis as a state just because it's easier to talk about. And I'm not really saying it's not this little narrow thing. If I say, well, you're generating alpha waves, so you are hypnotized. And that could be true. But we could also be doing a lot of things that we wouldn't necessarily consider hypnotic and be in an alpha state. So it's hard to compartmentalize it.
Now I can understand through your words and your new definition that we're going to have in the new book, which is, it just, you know, you want to define a state, right? And I mean, all psychology derived from, I mean, if you look historically back in the day, all the guys that invented or came upon the different psychological theories, etc., they all derive from hypnosis.
That's right.
And I mean, a lot of people forgot about it. We come into this day and age, the 21st century, And you have hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of psychologists, psychiatrists, that's their whole job throughout, I mean, they go through a formal studies, right? They get a first degree, second degree, master's degree, professors, and they want to compartmentalize and put that certain interchangeable state, which is hypnosis, into their definitions of psychology and work with it. And I can see why a lot of those people, although they're very sophisticated, highly intelligent, do not know how to work with hypnosis in the therapeutic way.
That's a good point. And there's an article that just came out in the UK. One of the psychologists there said to define hypnosis as what goes on in a clinical setting with professionals, and that anything besides that is trance. Well, truth is, it's all trance and all hypnosis, but
okay,
that's not, you know, by doing that, and I can understand why they do this, because we want to intellectualize this, we want to compartmentalize it, and that's where they're working. They're working on individuals through hypnosis with issues, much like I do, but they're thinking of it in a very confined way. And that kind of definition doesn't include things like waking hypnosis and informal and formal hypnosis and all the possible variables that could be out there. So they're trying to lump it into this little category again, which is common and has been going on throughout time. I mean, we used to think that hypnosis was sleep.
right.
We don't think it's sleep, you know. It's like it's crazy.
Yeah, it derives from the, I mean, hypno or hypnosis. Hypno comes from the certain goddess in the Greek, I think, mythology, which
Right.
the goddess of sleep.
Right.
Yeah.
Easy to see how it kind of got that connection there. And a lot
Yep.
of times people in hypnosis do appear to be asleep, or they even feel like they're asleep, but that's not necessarily the case.
Right. Right. And I mean, regarding the theory or the definition of hypnosis, I was just, I mean, I have a colleague in Israel. We're doing also another show, and he did not study hypnosis, but he studied NLP, guided imagery, and the trance world to work with the subconscious mind. And one thing that he told me in the interview, which is interesting, which connects to our topic, is that he has a lot of clients that come in and they're already defined, or they get certain, you know, they go to a psychiatrist or a psychologist, and they, you know, they're already labeled, you know, ADHD, you know, all the different definitions, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so he asked, and my colleague asked him, all right, so what does that mean? You know, I don't know about psychology, and I don't know about psychiatry and stuff like that. And the client says, well, what do you mean? You know, and he explains to him, he says, listen, if I start going through the DSM, right, or, you know, whatever label, that means that I'm not addressing your problem. I'm already putting something in a category which might be a problem for me as a therapist to help you. If I, do you know what I mean?
It's exactly right. And that's why I tell my students, you know, we want to avoid diagnosis for the most part, because once somebody has a diagnosis, they now become that thing. Like if we get a diagnosis of type 2 diabetes, now it changes the way we see the world around us. That is a trance, because it's like from now on, I function in the world as a diabetic. And
Right.
I have to think about what I eat, what medication I take, and things like that. Now, sometimes having the diagnosis can work in our favor. Like, for instance, and this is a simple one. I work with a lot of people who have trichotillomania, which means, you know, they pull their hair out. And it could be any hair. It could be their hair on the head, their eyebrows, eyelashes, anywhere. But people don't, it's, people who have it tend to not share that with other people because they're embarrassed about it and like that. And they'll call up and they'll talk to my office manager and they'll say, well, I've got this thing going on. And she goes, oh, Trichotillomania. And they go, oh my God, there's a name for this? And it can actually make people feel better because now they don't feel alone. I'm not the only person that has this. And by God, there's help for this, and there is. So sometimes the diagnosis can help, but a lot of times it doesn't help at all.
Right, right, because it is supposedly defines you as a person, or that behavior defines your persona.
Yeah, it's true. If you get a diagnosis of bipolar disorder, now that affects how you see your world, how the world sees you. It's not to say we shouldn't maybe have that diagnosis. I'm just saying it will compartmentalize us, like many of these definitions of hypnosis compartmentalize hypnosis.
Yeah.
And sometimes compartmentalizing things can be beneficial because it can help us to understand things like, we have a hypnosis mind model, which helps us to kind of compartmentalize how things work up there. But, if I crack somebody's head open and look inside, there's not a bunch of lines and drawings in there.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a part of it is that it's easy for us. I mean, if you put certain categories to things and you say, all right, this is, it's Sunday. So on Sunday, we do this. Monday, we do that. Tuesday, we do the other thing, and it makes everything simple. Why work hard? I mean, in that way,
Yes. And I think simple is good in a sense. Lindsay and I have a philosophy. When somebody comes in, do the easy things first. If somebody responds to the easy things, then that's great. What I always say is, there's no need to use an atomic bomb if a fly swatter will do the job, So, because some people go for these really aggressive, and I'm big on regression, and I've written, I have a book out on regression. I just got done teaching a whole 4-day class on regression, but we don't always need to go that deep or that hard to help somebody because we can change patterns, and that's a lot of what's going on. Let's say, for instance, and I see a lot of psychotherapists or hypnotherapists who do this. Somebody comes in for weight loss, and they maybe have sexual abuse issues in their background.
Right.
So the therapist goes, oh, we need to address that. And maybe, but first I always go, well, let's look at the behavioral things that are going on. And if you respond to that and it changes, it may not be connected to the sexual abuse. Or another thing that happens is the therapist works with them on the sexual abuse things, but they still don't lose weight because we still haven't addressed, they learned bad habits to get there, they get,
right.
So we have to deal with all that stuff.
Right. Yeah, I mean, with the weight loss, yes, definitely there's some like emotional issues, but who doesn't have emotional issues?
Sure. Yes.
On the other hand, yeah, not me. Yeah. On the other hand, people don't walk out of the office, or they don't exercise, or poor diet, or lack of vitamins, or lack of even drinking water. It's known that if you drink more water, you lose more weight.
Sure. Absolutely. And basically, weight's pretty simple. If everybody would just not do what they're doing.
Whatever you're doing, don't do it. Yeah, that's it. And don't pay anybody for that advice. Just do it. It is true, but it's hard to motivate a person.
There's so many with weight. There's so many patterns in hypnosis really that goes into that. It's like even our stress is a big thing. We get stressed. We look for something to help get us from it. And we may even realize we are stressed, but we know something feels a little out of sorts. Well, that candy bar looks pretty good. And, that will distract you. That will give you a little feel good sensation. But eventually, those candy bars or donuts or whatever builds up to become a real problem. But we create these patterns. And there's so many patterns with food. Every event that we go to calls for snacks and things like that.
Right.
There's almost nothing you go to where there's a food being served of some sort. And our herd mentality as individuals, we want to do what everybody else is doing. And well, they're all having donuts. I think I'll have donuts too. Lindsay and I were at a class full of psychologists, and it was, I believe it was around borderline personality disorder. And in the back of the room, they had like pastries and things like that. And the number of people, and these were all psychologists, who were overweight and were hitting that table back there with going, and we're gonna help people out there on the street. We can't even help ourselves.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny.
It definitely is.
Yeah. So we went to a different angle.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, but I'm very happy to hear about the new book because I do have one of your books here. What is hypnosis really?
Yeah.
And I also have the book, The Power of Suggestion.
Yeah.
And I think in this book, in the back of this book, or maybe it's the therapeutic hypnotherapist.
Yeah.
I was actually reading about, I think it's towards the end, about addictions.
Mm-hmm.
I think it is. And you do mention, people think addictions are like just cigarettes, alcohol, drugs, or sex, but there's a big problem with the...
Hey, if you got to have an addiction, sex is the best one.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, yeah. There are a lot of implications to that type of aspect, but it is relaxing, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It will de-stress you.
Yeah. So, what you mentioned in the book, exactly that about the addictions that people are hypnotized to eat, or
Absolutely. Yeah. How many times you think you come home from work, you have a long day, you walk in, you open the refrigerator, and you look in there. You don't go thinking, well, I have a certain nutritional requirements that needs to be met at this moment. Or you just open that refrigerator because that's what you do. You come in and open the refrigerator kind of unconsciously. Well, once you get that refrigerator door open, there just might be something in there that looks appetizing, and you might just grab it. So yeah, we get in those kind of patterns, and we do the same thing over and over. The subconscious doesn't care. The subconscious doesn't care if a pattern works for you or it works against you. The subconscious just likes to take the path of least resistance.
Right.
And I think it's in that book,
The Power of Suggestion.
Power of Suggestion, where I talk about, an analogy that I use is, if every day I walk out the door and I walk out the porch and I take this path off this direction, and I've always taken that path. Now that path, it could be the path of smoking, it could be the path of bad eating habits, it could be alcohol, it could be something else, but every day I go down that path. The subconscious doesn't care. It likes that path. It's going to keep going. But one day, when you step out the front door, you step on the porch, there's been a heck of a snowstorm, and you cannot see any path. But during the night, with the help of your local hypnotist, a path has been dug off here in this other direction, and now that becomes the likely choice. And that's what we do as hypnosis, is we're creating a new pathway for people to go. You can even think of it as a neural pathway, because that's what it does become. And that can happen pretty fast. But the subconscious will keep going that way as long as that works. you know, it's just like smokers. They leave here and don't want a cigarette again. Now, we've just created a new path. Now, I have people go, I'll tell you a funny story. This has happened several times, but this one woman was pretty funny. She had come to see one of our other therapists, Amber. And Amber, she did a great job for us with smokers. I was pleased with what she did. And she said, well, I saw Amber. I stopped smoking, and I didn't want a cigarette. I don't know, a couple, 2, 3 years passed, and she said, and the hypnosis wore off. And I said, really? The hypnosis wore off? And I said, well, tell me about that. And she said, well, I was out with some of my girlfriends having some drinks. And I don't know if somebody offered her a cigarette or she took one or what. And she said, and the hypnosis wore off, and now I'm smoking again. I said, okay. I said, well, what did that first cigarette taste like? And she said, oh, it tasted horrible. She said, it made me cough. It made me dizzy. I vomited. And I said, well, I said, if vomiting won't stop you, what do you expect the hypnosis to
do? That's a little hint, you know?
Yeah. But the thing is, when somebody stops smoking and they've been a non-smoker that long, it doesn't matter if the hypnotic suggestions are still doing anything to them or not, because they've created a new pattern. And they're going to keep going in that direction, so it doesn't matter. But that's not to say we can't override that, because everybody was a non-smoker once in their life, but now we have that choice, you know. So they start up again. It's not the fault of the hypnosis, but some people don't want to take responsibility, so they blame it on that.
Yeah, definitely. I remember actually that example in particular. My father used to tell me when I was little, you know, I started walking, I don't know, it's the age of 1.5 or 2 years old. I have a twin brother, and he started walking much faster than I did. And every time I'd fall, I'd look at my father, you know, and say, ooh, because of you, or something like that. Just point at him or point at somebody else, you know. It's like a natural phenomena, you know. We cannot take responsibility.
Yeah.
You know, it's like an automatic thing. Even if you do take responsibility and you're the most responsible person in the world, you're always like, you know, who do I put this on first? You know, that's the immediate thought, you know.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. I would like to also go into, I mean, you're not only